It's a bird. It's a plane. It's talk radio like you've never heard before. Welcome to the Kathy Jordan Show. Get your seatbelt on and get ready to ride on board one of the fastest growing talk shows in town. Strap in and get ready to ride on board one of the fastest growing talk shows in town. The Kathy Jordan Show.
Welcome to the Kathy Jordan Show. Hello, everybody. World Wide Web, as well as those that are listening via the other parts of the internet or via iHeartRadio or your cell phone or just listening on grandma's porch, old-fashioned radio. We like that. WAEC Love 860 AM Atlanta is where we are housed for the Kathy Jordan Show, and we just love being here and, basking in the sunshine, and then we get inside the station, there's sunshine too. Happy people all around, and we're happy ourselves, so we can appreciate that. We used to have coworkers say, well, you couldn't be that happy all the time. Well, I beg to differ. I am that happy all the time, and I'm thankful that I can be. So today we're going to be talking about a very, very touchy subject. It resonates in a lot of families. There's deep history. There's all kinds of knockout, drag-out fighting, and there's, name calling and blame, and, it's got everything. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Everything to go with it. We're going to be talking about alcoholism today, and we're going to talk about it not because we want to make sure that someone gets embarrassed. Let's just face it, folks. It's happening all around us. There are people that are getting into trouble. There are people that are crying out for help. And then there are people that are simply not letting you help them. But whatever way you look at it, alcoholism is a disease. It is on the increase, not on the decrease. And there's more and more access. So as teenagers grow older and they're able to now go out and not get carded, and they can just drink until they're blue in the face, or whether or not you have people that are driving up to convenience stores and picking it up and pretending they have an ID that's valid when it's not, or even just having a store clerk turn the other way while they buy what they want. It's always been available for the person that really, really tries to get it, and it's becoming easier and easier to get it, and it's changing lives. Not all lives lost are, things that we can just sneeze at, turn the other cheek, and don't worry about. We're going to be back on the Kathy Jordan Show and talk more about alcoholism today. We have a solid guest that's coming on that has been in sobriety, and he can tell us all about it from point A to Z. We'll be back on the Kathy Jordan Show after this.
Does your well water leave brown rust stains on clothes and fixtures? Does it smell bad? Get rid of it all with the Hydrocare Iron 300X. Hydrocare's multi-stage process gets rid of iron, sulfide, and odors. Hydrocare is an easily installed compact system without tanks, backwashing, or servicing, and only costs $799. You'll be amazed how fresh and clean well water can be. Satisfaction guaranteed. For more information, visit goodclearwater.com. goodclearwater.com.
At Advance Auto Parts, we don't just drop our prices. Oh, no. We hurl them toward the ground forcefully. It's our Advance full throttle savings. Right now at Advance, step up to Valvoline Max Life High Mileage Oil. A 5+ quarts jug and a filter is just $21.99. Give your engine the protection of high mileage oil for the price of conventional. Just $21.99. Better oil, lower price. Only at Advance Auto Parts. See store for details.
Welcome back to the Kathy Jordan Show, and we're sober, and everything else in the studio today, but we're getting into a very heavy subject, and the reason it's so heavy is because a lot of people want to be in denial about it. Inside families, outside families, inside the workplace, everywhere you go, this topic resonates, and some people admit it and some don't, simply. Our thought for the day, it's one thing to say you want help, but I have a question for you. What are you doing to help yourself? That being our thought for today on the Kathy Jordan Show. And so we're going to talk about alcoholics. And all alcoholics are not anonymous. Some are well known, well prescribed, and out there and in the workplaces and everywhere else. And so we want to make sure that as we talk about this topic today, you know in advance that this is a tender topic and we are taking it very seriously. But we have to be very candid, folks. And so we have joining us today Scott Stevens, and he's a best-selling author. He's talked about alcoholism all over the country and overseas and everywhere else. Anywhere he's invited to discuss it because he's lived it up close and personal. Scott, thanks for being on the show today.
Really appreciate it, Kathy. An excellent opportunity to reach out a little bit during Alcohol Awareness Month.
We really appreciate you being on here with us. And folks, you can jot down these numbers, call us. Scott is going to be so generous enough to give away 2 of his books. His book that he's going to be giving away is called There's a Silver Lining in a Relapse, all in the same sentence. He's going to be talking about his book a little bit more later in the show, and we're going to be giving away a couple copies of the book. You can call into the show in the Atlanta area, 404-355-8699. or toll free from anywhere in the United States and abroad, 866-923-2860. And Scott, you know, without getting into a whole lot of detail about your background, let's kind of set the precedent for this because, you know, sometimes people glamorize alcohol or sometimes they downplay it or they may even make it seem like it's no big deal. Can you tell us where you were to where you are now as far as how it relates to you?
Right. I've been on both sides of that. I've glamorized it and made no big deal out of it and been in complete denial about alcohol and what it was doing in my life. I am alcoholic. I, at one point in my life, was drinking 2 liters, or at least 2 liters of Jack Daniels every day. Didn't bother with the glass, didn't bother with the ice, just give me the bottle. And that was my life for a little better than 2 years. I'm a late bloomer. I didn't start drinking alcoholically until I was in my mid-30s. When I was a kid, I experimented with alcohol. When I was in college, I went to a couple of keg parties, all that fun stuff, but it didn't... in looking back, I was definitely showing the signs of what alcoholism could do, because when my very first drinking experience, we had just a couple of guys. We were freshmen in high school, and they finished 2 beers, and they were all loopy, and I'm like, where's mine? Where's more? And that idea of tolerance was set early on for me, but it didn't really surface until my mid-30s, and I started drinking heavily. I tried to quit once, and then I realized that alcohol, that was my friend, alcohol failed me because I could not stop drinking.
Well, let's go back and talk just a little bit about these different stages and different aspects of each stage of your life, and ultimately talk about the fact that you've been sober for a number of years, and we'll talk about that in detail as well toward the end of the show. So if we take this period of time where you were first introduced to alcohol in your teenage years or as a college student, what prompted you to even start to drink, and what did you think you would get out of it if you can just kind of delve back into your mindset?
It was all curiosity. When I was a high schooler, all the older kids were doing it, and I wouldn't say it was a great deal of peer pressure, but it was what's this? Why is this so much fun for these people? And that was what was behind the first drink. And during high school, every once in a while, I live up in Wisconsin, grew up here, and we have bonfires out in the country, and we have big football homecoming games. Well, they have those all over the country, but the ritual up here was to have a big kegger before the homecoming, or we would go out in the field and just drink beer.
And what were your parents doing? Were they paying attention, or was it acceptable?
It was not acceptable, but you tried to pull it off anyway. As a teenager, you think you're getting away with everything. Now that I have teens of my own, I know that that's not exactly the case. but it's such a part of not just our culture here in Wisconsin, but the society of America in general, that kids are going to experiment. It's like, okay, I know where they are, I know what they're up to, and he's not driving. So, that is what they view as the barrier here, is driving, when in actuality this substance is toxic, and it causes more than 60 different diseases, and they don't hit you all at once. I mean, these are things that come up later in life as a result of drinking alcohol. So parents are viewing this as a driving risk and maybe a rite of passage in their teens, but that's what America thinks right now. But in actuality, this is a toxic carcinogen that has, and for people like me who have the genetic predisposition to be alcoholic.
And that's what we're going to talk about as well, is, the dispositions and the intuitive step. I mean, you took the first step, you took it because you wanted to, you had access, and you did it. And was it a matter of peer pressure and the fact that, like you said, it was a ritual, it was understandable that even though your parents didn't hand it to you directly, that they were doing some sort of monitoring. They knew that this could likely happen or that it had happened. And so it was more or less tolerated or accepted along those lines. And like you say, as long as you weren't driving. But there's so much that can happen before you get into a car. I mean, getting into the car is the last stage of your night out at an alcoholic night, right?
Right. In fact, I just did a story on this. My main role as an author and a reporter is to report on alcohol and health. And when people think about teenagers and drinking, they're thinking of, again, drinking and driving. But the number one cause of alcohol-related death for teens is not behind the wheel. It is alcohol-related violence. So as a result of the drinking, they've put themselves either in a position to be a victim or to be an aggressor. But either way, the alcohol has played a role in more deaths among the teen to 20s than getting behind the wheel drinking. So there are other components to teen drinking that just kind of slip under the radar, or have, they're the things that we don't want to talk about.
Yeah. We'd like to remind our callers, we're giving away books that Scott has written, and it's going to be very prevalent. If you know of someone in your life that you are involved with, or even if it's you, I mean, call us. We can give you a book that's going to help to get through a period, because Scott is writing from firsthand knowledge and not from hearsay. And so it has to be very relevant, whatever's in this book, and it's selling like hotcakes on Amazon. The number to dial, 404-355-8699 or 866-923-2860. So, Scott, when we go back to this, we talk about children being around their parents, or even there are some parents that are handing their kids a beer and say, oh, well, go ahead, start drinking. You're going to do it anyway, and you might as well do it in front of me. I mean, how is that received from a person that has been all phases of alcoholism? Is that even a good idea? So what if they're going to drink it somewhere else? Shouldn't they even at least try to hide it?
I think part of the message of Alcohol Awareness Month, and certainly the message of my books, is that no, this isn't an idea that's acceptable anymore. The status quo is no longer acceptable or sustainable when it comes to underage drinking, or when it comes to people that are older drinking, because when we look at the health consequences, it gathers over time, not just with the disease of alcoholism, but when you talk about cancer and other types of illnesses, cardiovascular illness that are complicated by alcohol, that the idea of starting, or that it's acceptable, it's okay, has been ingrained in our culture, but we need to rethink that.
Yeah, well, we know alcohol. We know that alcohol abuse and dependence are now both included on the diagnosis of alcohol use disorder, and that alcoholism is a disease. I mean, it's characterized by the suffering of people that have a pattern of drinking excessively, despite the negative effects of alcohol on the individual and on his work. His or her medical side of it, the legal side, the educational side, the social life. I mean, this may involve a destructive pattern of alcohol use that includes a number of different symptoms. And sometimes people see these symptoms, they see the results, and they turn the other cheek. So when you went to college, you said that you had more free access even then. And what, every step of the way, there are people around you that love you, know you, that said, well, Scott, you're changing some. Did anyone ever come to you and say, hey, maybe you shouldn't be drinking?
At that point, it still wasn't very much of an issue because although the way I was drinking in binges in college, I would go out maybe once a month or so because I was putting myself through school. So I didn't have a well-developed daily pattern or anything like that. It was I'd go out, I'd binge, and then I would not drink for a couple of months and then go out and do it again. So and binge drinking has become so acceptable in colleges that it's the norm, and that's kind of what I get at with my books and the stigma of alcoholism is that people who don't drink or don't in the college age that don't go out somehow have this cloud over them. They get the stink eye from somebody. You're not drinking? What's wrong with you? And the concept of staying sober in college is so alien to acceptable college life and that's another part of the stigma we need to change about it. But for my own instance, it didn't come up.
Yeah.
On the surface, my grades were great. I was pulling 20 to 22 credits a semester because I was eager to get out of there because I was paying my own bills.
Right. So you were very dedicated to getting an education. There were no real flags. Do you think really deep down, though, the people that do care about you really did know that you were drinking and probably drinking excessively, and they may have said, well, he'll figure it out, or this is, again, a rite of passage or something like that? Because what I'm getting at is that there are people that know things that are going on, but then they turn the other cheek and say, well, it's going to work out somehow.
I think that in probably the 60s and 70s and the 80s is when I went to college. It was still a developing idea on the genetics of alcoholism and the family tree that goes on behind this. I think my parents had concern because my dad was alcoholic and that we've seen the consequences of what that did to the marriage and what that did to my dad's health. But making the connection to, okay, did we give this guy a pretty dirty genetic package here where he may be more susceptible to the disease wasn't really part of the discussion in the mid-'80s. And, we're certainly here 25 years later, a lot more, boy, did I say 25? It's actually been 30. Have I been out that long? But,
join the crowd.
A few more decades have gone by, and the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. We discovered better things to do with them, and we're discovering better things to do and better things to understand about alcohol. And nowadays, there's very much been a connection genetically and within families. So, did we know, or had we known back in the 80s the genetic connection, then I bet my parents would have been completely alarmed at the amount or the fact at all that I was going out binge drinking every couple of weekends or every couple of months.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about the genetic side of it because there's plenty of excuses being thrown around, but we know that genetically it is possible to inherit this, and we're going to delve into that a little bit. One of the responses I got back from a person that was knowing that we were going to talk about this show today, she was saying she's age 45 to 54. It's a female, and she's heartbroken. She says her son abuses alcohol and drugs. She struggles daily to not let it destroy her own life. But as his mom, she had to make a decision not to contact him. Living with the guilt of not being able to help your child is hard, she says, and it's a judgment call. She receives a lot of bad judgment from others who can't understand how she can just simply walk away. And only people in her situation, she says, can understand that at some point you have to realize that alcoholics will use you until you're used up, and then they will find others to use. And tough love is called tough for a reason. She says she's praying that she'll find a way to get to her son, or that he will find his own way and give up alcohol. How many times have you heard stuff like that?
Thousands. When I wrote Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud, it was intended for not just the alcoholics, but for families, just like the person you're describing, who have a son or a brother or a father that is battling the disease, or sometimes just in complete denial about it. Well, the book is for those people, but it's also for the families that are scratching their head wondering, why would they do this to themselves? And once they get sober, why return to the misery? When we talk about recovery, we're talking about recovering families too. And the person that you spoke about has heard the exact right advice, and that sometimes you do have to love from a distance, and that I'll tell you from my own experience as an alcoholic, we're manipulative, and we're great liars. And we can, when it comes to getting between me and a bottle of Jack Daniels at the height of my addiction, I would do anything to have that extra drink, to continue to, or in my case, it was to avoid sobering up, because withdrawal symptoms scared the heck out of me. And that's, whatever is the hang up for that person psychologically or with the stigma to get past the alcohol or to begin to try recovery, until they reach that point, they're going to continue to manipulate, continue to hurt the family around them, and it's far more often it's the emotional damage than it is the physical damage. And that's not to say people don't get physically violent when they're drinking, but the emotional damage goes through generations.
Yeah, and of course, it is that thing of, okay, they're grown. They know how to make decisions. Mm-hmm. They have to stop doing this to themselves. They have to stop doing this to me. They have to stop doing this to others around them. And in a lot of cases, people are just saying that, and then they're using it as a cop-out. How much involvement should you really, really have? Or should you just say that, okay, it's tough love and I've got to step away. But at what point do you step away, or do you ever step away, really?
Well, you're never completely stepping away, especially from family. And that's definitely part of being a family is when things are down, you're with each other. But loving from a distance is absolutely necessary, but you need to continue to put information where it's accessible to them and encourage them. If they want the help, you're willing to help. See, the problem with alcoholism is this is the only disease that will convince your mind that you don't have it. So we have a lot of denial around, I'm drinking a lot, but, and then you fill in the blank there. You've got an excuse. I have a really stressful job. If you had the wife I had, you'd drink too. You come up with these crazy rationalizations for continuing to poison yourself because your body thinks, or your disease has tricked your mind into thinking, I'm okay.
Wow. And we know that
as long as you're getting alcohol, you feel that you're okay. You feel that you're not okay when you don't have it.
Yeah. Well, alcohol abuse, on the less severe end of the alcohol use disorder, affects about 10% of women and 20% of men in the United States. Most began in their mid-teens, as you mentioned. And then signs of alcoholic intoxication include obvious things like smell of alcohol in the breath or skin, or bloodshot eyes. Personally, is usually passive and easygoing, becomes argumentative, and they have lots of things that give you telltale signs. So, as raising teenagers right now, what are you looking for? Are you thinking, okay, I know this thing is genetic and I know that it could affect them, and I've had the conversations with them, but you mentioned that your own dad had a drinking disorder. So how are these things passed down through the generations for people that do become sober and ready to tackle this? What do they do?
Well, for parents looking for signs in their teens, I think you hit on the key ones, and that, of course, the smell or the eyes glassing over, your eyeballs look like they were dunked in oil. They just have a glassy look to them. That's the sign that alcohol is in the body, and that's one of the reactions that is impossible to mask, is the wet eyeball. You may be able to put all the eye drops in the world in there to get the redness out, but the look of an eyeball being very wet is one of those things that you can't medicate away. Another thing is the change in routine or change in behavior. If they're staying home or staying after school late and coming up with other excuses that may seem fishy. Hey, look, if it doesn't pass the sniff test, it's not kosher. This is not something. If it seems out of the ordinary, trust your instinct on this, because as parents, your instinct is usually pretty spot on.
Well, even parents that are not, very close to their children. I mean, some say, well, we just pass it like ships in the night, and, I let him do what he's going to do, or I'll let her do what she's going to do, and then I do my own thing, and I'm not real tight on my kids, and I don't pay all that kind of attention, and so I missed it. And so at some of these meetings for parents after the fact, some are in denial even all the way up to the meeting after the fact. I mean, their child may have been killed, their child may have killed someone else in an auto accident, or something may have happened, like you said, the violence associated with teens and other young adults drinking is not always just the drive itself. So, but sometimes parents say, and they try to rationalize it after the fact and say, I just didn't see it, or if I saw it, I just didn't want to believe it, and I'm sorry now, but I mean, it's lives later, right?
And it's so taboo, Kathy, that people don't want to believe it. They don't want to believe this is in their house. And your statistics were spot on that basically 1 in about 12 people have this disease, and it is a disease, and that we've attached so much social stigma to this disease that we think that it is this evil, immoral problem with their head, and really it's a physical disease that they have. But we've attached this taboo to it, that not in my house thing, where we want to come up with all sorts of excuses that, well, he just had too much to drink that night, or this was a one-off thing, it never happens that way. And if you look at the different signs, the symptoms of alcoholism, the disease, then you can begin to piece together what is actually happening. And once you break down that wall of denial for yourself, then you're more alert and more aware to what's going on with the person who you suspect may have the addiction, may have the disease, but also not everybody who drinks in excess is an alcoholic. They're just plain alcohol abusers, and I'm not giving them the green light to go ahead and do it, but they don't run the risk of the complications of the disease of alcoholism, because they don't have the genetics behind it that will turn an abusive drinker into an alcoholic.
And we're going to talk about those distinctions. Now, we're going to play a clip as we go to the break. We're going to come back with Scott Stevens in just a moment. But we're going to play a clip. It's regarding a very highly publicized case, a wealthy teen who killed 4 people in Texas in a drunk driving incident, didn't go to jail after a judge ruled recently that he must attend an expensive rehab facility paid for by his rich parents. The driver was 16-year-old Ethan Couch, and he was speeding with a blood alcohol level more than 3 times the legal limit. Ethan Couch had admitted to his crime. And in the case that went before a Texas judge, the prosecutors sought a 20-year sentence for him. But instead, the judge sentenced him to 10 years of probation after a psychologist claimed that Ethan Couch, at 16, had what he called affluenza. And we're going to talk with Scott on the other side of this, have him explain what affluenza is. But let's listen to this clip, go to the break, and we'll be back on the Kathy Jordan Show after this.
And how many people need EMS?
Ma'am, I'm telling you, it's dark. There's 4 or 5 kids. There's kids laying in ditches and streets.
That was a 911 call from last June when 4 people were killed by a drunk driver. The driver was 16-year-old Ethan Couch. He was speeding with a blood alcohol level more than 3 times the legal limit. Couch has admitted to his crime, and in a case that went before a Texas judge, prosecutors sought a 20-year sentence. Instead, he was sentenced to 10 years probation after a psychologist claimed he suffered from affluenza, which he described as growing up in a house where the parents were preoccupied with arguments that led to a divorce. On Wednesday, a judge ordered him to go to an expensive rehabilitation facility paid for by his parents.
You're listening to The Kathy Jordan Show. This is no ordinary show and no ordinary host. Kathy puts her heart into bringing you the best topics and the best guests. Keep listening. More Kathy after this.
Trying to sell your old car? Instead, donate your vehicle to Heritage for the Blind. Pickup is free and your donation is tax deductible. Just call 1-800-953-4036. Heritage for the Blind accepts cars, vans, trucks, and boats, whether they run or not. Call right now and receive a free 3-day vacation voucher to over 50 locations. Call 1-800-953-4036. Donate your car today. That's 1-800-953-4036.
Robitussin Cofequence number 29, the not-so-silent night.
Sorry, hon.
Oh, you keep waking me up.
I think that's...
Come on, it's 3 a.m. I gotta get up for work in 4 hours.
Fortunately, Robitussin DM Max now comes in a new nighttime formula for fast, powerful cough relief that helps you sleep like a baby, which is good news for you and the person one pillow over. Robitussin Nighttime. Don't suffer the consequences. Use as directed.
It's talk radio like you've never heard before, where we talk, you listen, and when you talk, we listen. Call us now, toll free at 866-923-2860, or in the Atlanta area, 404-355-8699.
Welcome back to the Kathy Jordan Show. Our thought for today is, it's one thing to say you want help, but I have one question for you. What are you doing to help yourself? And that may seem cruel when it comes to alcoholism and the topic that's on the table today, because some people can't help themselves if they get into the alcoholic genetic side of things, where they are just predestined to, take up this alcoholic habit once they do it. Everyone can say no the first time, right? And we're going to ask Scott Stevens, our guest, about that. But if they do take it on, and the genetics of the matter kick in, it is a disease or illness. And so it does have its own effect on people and on the people all around. And before we went to the break, we had a clip about affluenza and this 16-year-old that was sentenced out in Texas. And so Scott Stevens, the author of the book that talks about sobriety. He first did a book called Guy Next Door, and he was talking about the fact that not everyone that is alcoholic or abusing alcohol is going to appear to be doing so. And then his second book is the one we're giving away on the air today for 2 people that want to get it. You can call in. It's called Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud, Relapse, and the Symptoms of Sobriety. So, Scott, welcome back to the show. And we were talking about the fact that, sometimes people are just simply not going to do what's right. But what about this new defense of affluenza? What's that?
That is slick lawyering, is what that is. The concept of affluenza is a lot of legal hocus pocus. There is probably some psychological condition called affluenza, but as far as that relates to getting behind the wheel intoxicated, listen, I got 4 OWIs in 6 weeks during the height of my addiction, because I was drinking and driving, not because I was having struggles with an ex-wife or difficulty with work or any type of affluent problem or any type of poor problem. It was because I was drinking and driving. And that's where this whole case in Texas falls apart, in my opinion. That teen, that driver, got behind the wheel and took away 180 years worth of life that lied ahead of those people.
Yeah.
Now, I know that alcohol it clouds your judgment. It makes you think you're fine to drive when you're not even close. There are even studies that prove that even at a 0.01 blood alcohol concentration, your ability to drive is compromised. And whether you knowingly got behind the wheel drinking, or whether you just thought you were okay, or you thought you were close to the limit, you know what? You got behind the wheel. You committed what is considered to be a crime, and a 10-year probation and a sentence to treatment because you have affluenza is garbage.
Yeah, I mean, how many people can say, you know what, I went out and shot somebody because my mommy and daddy keep me in Gucci. I mean, I got too much money, too much time on my hands. No one's raising me, and so I just went out and got a gun, and because of affluenza, I was able to shoot somebody, but it's not my fault. I mean, that's the excuse that this judge pretty much went along with, and was allowing this teen to go and get minimum sentencing for, just being even watched for 10 years while these people did die. And it's serious. So we see that there are cases and there are results and consequences that are extremely harsh in some case. And we see that people are walking away from responsibility for their actions after the fact.
And that's the key part of recovery, is taking responsibility for your actions. And it has nothing to do of whether you're in a trailer park or whether you're in a 4,000 square foot home. It has nothing to do with the amount of zeros on your paycheck or the color of your skin or anything like that. This disease is not going to discriminate, and it will continue to dominate if you don't take responsibility for your own recovery. We like to see people in recovery, but we can't make them go to recovery. And that is one of the biggest things about alcoholism is there's this old saying, Kathy, you know it, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
Right.
Well, that's the case with an alcoholic. The alcoholic is going to have to want this for himself or herself. You can't make some of the people in the legal system will say, well, certainly you can make them thirsty, but you don't make them thirsty by drowning them in it. You can give them ideas of what the disease will do to you in the long run, financially, physically, emotionally, socially, etc. Or, you can force them into recovery or force them into rehab, and if they're not embracing the message, they're just using up bed space for somebody who wants to hear the message and wants to get better.
Yeah, I mean, some signs of a drinking problem, though, there are plenty of signs like we talked about, but sometimes people that drink alone say, well, I'm just escaping the worries of the day, or I've had a rough week, or I just want to spend some time alone, and there's no harm in that. Or they may be doing other things. I mean, it may be for the sole purpose of just getting drunk and forgetting everything. Or it could be people that are basically hiding themselves from the world. They hide alcohol in places that they can easily find it in case someone does discover that they may have too many bottles of alcohol laying around, or they may have too many 6-packs of beer inside the refrigerator door. And, the other thing about it, too, is along the racial lines, people, are sometimes will say, well, there's a liquor store on every corner in the black neighborhood. Well, there may be. I mean, there's a liquor store on every corner in the white neighborhood, too. I mean, they're all around, and they're selling in droves this alcohol that's in there. So is this going to be a stigma that may be attached to the color situation, to where we see this young white teen in Texas getting away with, creating mayhem? And, even some of the observations were if he were a black teen that had done the same thing, he would be locked up right now. But we don't want to race bait with situations that, like you said, alcohol itself and the liquor that is consumed has no color barrier. It's not, well, this is a dosage for black people and this is a dosage for whites. There's no real genetic difference in the fact of whether or not a person is going to take this on and drink more or less based on the color of their skin, right?
That's perfectly said, and that this isn't a race issue at all. This isn't an affluence issue. This is a disease, and it's going to cross any line, imaginary or real, to claim a person who has the genetic makeup for it, and the genetics are colorblind.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that we wanted to talk about, this book, we're going to get into both of them. The Guy Next Door book, of course, was your first one. But among the things that are going on today, let's talk about alcoholism today. And the Affordable Care Act actually made alcohol misuse everybody's business beginning this year. What do you mean by that?
Well, one of the great things about the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, however you want to term this, is that it put alcohol treatment, the term is called parity, and it put it on parity with other types of medical and surgical procedures. So there isn't a separate dollar limit anymore under the Affordable Care Act. You can't say, well, we're going to cap alcohol treatment coverage at $28,000 and you have up to $1 million in coverage for surgical procedure. No, the alcohol treatment is, or any type of addiction treatment, is covered under parity laws. So now up to those same limits within an insurance policy, you can receive treatment. Now, where this also comes into play, and it has been for a number of years, is that even though we collect taxes on alcohol, the fact is we collect about 90 cents per drink, and the actual cost to taxpayers for alcohol-related damage, to not just physical damage but also lost productivity, comes out to be about $2.10. So every taxpayer has skin in this game.
Yeah.
As far as, even before the Affordable Care Act, but now with the Affordable Care Act, we have more motivation to make sure that those people who are causing the accidents or causing the lost productivity to take advantage of the availability of treatment or any type of counseling resource that is available to them. And as we now have this Affordable Care Act, it is more accessible. In general, we were just new at this, so we haven't seen this play out. But the legislation is there in place to make this, on paper, at least practicable.
Yes, and that's what counts. I mean, it's available, and it's a part of the package, and more and more people will take advantage of it, hopefully. One of the other feedbacks that I did get when throwing this topic out earlier on my LinkedIn page, one woman sent me a note back saying her sister is an alcoholic and she ruins every holiday. The woman says, I see her grown children in pain when they're looking at her. They're looking at her with disgust, and even her grandchildren make fun of her, or they cry of the ridiculous things she has to say and do. She drinks at home alone. She drinks at major holidays and at all of our events. She's had major falls and other scrapes. Her appearance is horrible. She's aged overnight, lost so much weight. And, she even just in public drunkenness, has points of, incontinence and all kinds of stuff. And they know that she is anxious about different things, but she just won't admit to being an alcoholic. So does it come down to that last sentence, admitting to be an alcoholic?
Right. The way that 12-step programs work, I attend one, but I've also embraced other forms of recovery, and frankly, I don't care if you believe in crop circles, and those are going to make you stick to your sobriety. Whatever you embrace is your program. If it keeps you sober, I'm all for it. In the 12-step world, that's the first step, admitting that you're powerless over alcohol and that your life becomes unmanageable. And to reach that point, it took me 2 years to finally admit that, to accept that I was powerless. And that's a big step, whether you're a guy or a girl, to come up against something that you can't beat. You can't win on your own. And to admit that, but once you do, then you open a whole universe of opportunity, because once you're sober, you have your life back.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your story. The Guy Next Door book that you first wrote, you were talking about your own story from devouring, like you said at the beginning of the program, you were drinking 2 liters of whiskey a day, and then you went from that to sobriety. But you had trips along the way that took you close to death. I mean, what is your worst experience? But before you answer that, let's talk about the stereotype. You were the guy next door, look-alike type, and no one suspected that you might be an alcoholic. So what hides this thing that makes it really dangerous? Being an alcoholic means you're crafty, and you hide things. That's the definition of addiction. An addiction is anything you feel you have to hide. So if you're smoking in secret, okay, that's an addiction. But for me, The Guy Next Door is the subtitle of the book. The title of the book is What the Early Worm Gets. And for a number of years, I was the early bird getting the worm. And then once alcohol took it over, I found out what the worm gets instead of what the early bird gets. But the addiction to alcohol had taken me from being the guy who's sitting behind you in church or in the foursome behind you or in the house right next door with the clean yard and the great-looking kids and everything else. All of these other pieces by which we measure success, I had, including this fat cat mutual fund industry job. But in
in private at home, I was drinking, like I said, 2 liters a day, and trying to keep that out of the public view. So I would work my schedule around the chance of me sobering up. So, because I was, like I mentioned earlier, I was terrified of going through withdrawal, so I constantly had to keep alcohol in my body. I had to get a pint next to my bed so I could even make it down the stairs, because my vertigo and my balance and my shakes were so terrible without the alcohol that I had to have that right away first thing in the morning just to get going to work.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. You know, we alluded earlier that there is some health risk. People talk about the genetics of it, and of course they inherited this, and that's why they do what they do or whatever. But the first drink, like we said, has to be a decision that they make, or someone forces them to take that first drink. They take one after, and it continues and spirals out of control. But no amount is safe. The link between alcohol and cancer is just that great that no amount of alcohol is safe?
That's correct. There was an article that I did a little earlier this year, and it's been known for at least 2 decades that alcohol is a carcinogen. But the link between alcohol and cancer, and there are several different types of cancer, which it is most prevalent in: liver, pancreas, esophagus, other types of oral cancer, throat cancer, etc., where the amount of alcohol is directly proportional to the increase of risk of contracting that type of cancer. And with breast cancer, for example, this is one that is the measure of deterrence that a woman can take dietarily, because it is the only dietary connection that has ever been made between any food or beverage you intake and an increased risk of breast cancer. So if you cut out the alcohol, your risk of breast cancer actually goes down. So the connection to cancer, various types of cancer, and especially breast cancer, is a very well-documented one, and a number of oncologists came out earlier this year to say, look, we have the study evidence to say no amount of alcohol, whether you're alcoholic or not, and non-alcoholics face the same health risks minus the disease of alcoholism that a person with alcoholism does, because this is that toxic and that dangerous.
Wow. And, you know, in our conversations earlier, as we were preparing for the show in the last few weeks and talking about this topic, I did mention to you that I do some work with seniors as a consultant in the senior industry. And there's so many baby boomers out there. There's so much going on with that particular industry. But one of the things that I did learn in the past 4 years or so that I've been associated with consulting in that business is that there are more and more 40, 45-year-old, early 50s or whatever, that are not even truly baby boomers, that are being diagnosed with vascular dementia. So this has a lot to do with the onset of a lot of other different types of illnesses, not just cancer or the big boys that we like to mention, but dementia is a nightmare. And so for people that drink excessively and continue to do that over and over again and continue to abuse, there are so many different health risks that go along with it. Cancer and dementia being a biggie. Vascular dementia is very aggressive, so no one wants to be caught with that. Now, I want to talk about the flip side in our last couple of minutes together. Sure. Is it wishful thinking that some alcoholics report that there are health benefits to alcohol?
Well, we've all heard the idea that red wine helps with cardiovascular health, and those reports are based on observational medicine, where I have these patients, they all are drinking red wine, and they're all in great health. So the actual real research that goes into alcohol and health, where it's clinical versus observational, that will prove that all of these health claims about helping with depression or cardiovascular health go by the wayside, because in reality, alcohol does worsen cardiovascular health and does make things like depression and just about any other physical ailment, more than 60 that are directly tied to alcohol use, that, the connection is so strong where doctors say the observational reports are great, but the evidence-based science says no amount is safe.
Yeah. We wanted to just throw out a couple of stats as we end this portion with Scott Stevens. Almost 2,000 people under the age of 21 years of age die each year in car crashes in which underage drinking is involved and proven. Alcohol is involved in nearly half of all these deaths that include teens, period. But with treatment, about 70% of people with alcoholism are able to decrease the number of days they consume alcohol and improve their overall health status within 6 months. We know that Alcoholics Anonymous is one of the largest organizations in the world that does tackle this problem, and we know that lots of people go to it. They go to it sometimes periodically. They go to it diligently in some cases. Scott, in closing, what can you say to a person, because you've been from one extreme to the other, what can you say, having lived sober now for years, written a book about it or two, what can you say to that person that may be listening that has a relative themselves or a friend or a coworker that they're concerned with, and then even the one that's listening themselves that are in denial about being in this condition?
Well, for the person who has the disease, no matter how bad it is, it can always get worse. And when you're ready to reach out and get help, there's no time like the present, and the help is available. There's no shame at all in getting help, because I battled that for years, and once I finally gave in to getting help, then I got the help I needed. And that's all it takes, is having an extra person to talk to. And that's what every silver lining gets into, is reaching out and expressing, talking about the things we don't talk about to get that help. With the family surrounding the alcoholic, understand that 9 out of 10 people who quit drinking go back to drinking, called a relapse. 9 out of 10 former drinkers go back to it at least once. And a relapse is not the end of the world here. And that's what every silver lining has a cloud is about, is that understand why people relapse, understand that for many people it is part of their road to recovery, but you can still recover once you have a relapse. And you can learn from this book what are the signs that a relapse may be imminent and how to deal with it. And that, again, is not just for the alcoholic, but for the family around them, so they understand the relapse nature of this disease.
Well, we thank you so much, Scott Stevens. He's a best-selling author. The name of the book that we were discussing today, some tidbits from, is called Every Silver Lining Has a Cloud, Relapse and the Symptoms of Sobriety. And you can find it on Amazon.com and other places. Scott, thanks so much for being with us on the show. We're going to come back in a few minutes. Remember, our thought for today, as we conclude on alcoholism, it's one thing to say you want help, but I have a question for you. What are you doing to help yourself? Back on the Kathy Jordan Show after this.
Stay in your seat. You don't want to miss what comes next. Back on the Kathy Jordan Show after this.
Keep my head up. No, I'm not here to stay. There's gonna be bad. Thank God for today.
Hey family, it's Dorian Paul Williams, formerly of Uncle Charlie and the Gap Band. Now listen, my foundation, the Fathers Who Will Foundation, is inviting you to join the movement to motivate C-average high school seniors and college students right here in Atlanta to continue their education and skill training. Your support will help to provide valuable resources so these worthy students can build a bright future. To make a contribution or find out if your child qualifies, visit cscholarshiptour.com or call 888-900-8958.
Might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break.
The Kathy Jordan Show is on the air. Tune in. Call a friend. Better yet, call Kathy. Make her your friend. It's talk radio like you've never heard before. The Kathy Jordan Show.
Welcome back to the Kathy Jordan Show. We have about 8 minutes. You know what? I am that happy, folks. I'm making no apologetics about it. I mean, I'm just who I am. I'm happy to spread the happiness around. We love to do that. We're going to talk to Marsha in just a moment. Marsha's not in the studio, so we're going to introduce her. Marsha of the Marsha Moment. Take it away.
Welcome back to the Kathy Jordan Show. As you know, this is Marsha with today's Marsha Moment. Now listen, if you were engaged to be married and all of a sudden things went south and the wedding was called off, would it be expected as the woman to give back the engagement ring? Would it depend on who was at fault? Or is a gift simply a gift? Or should the ring be given back simply because the conditions on which the ring was given was never met? This hot topic today, in my opinion, should be a no-brainer, but it made it all the way to the Supreme Court of New York. Mr. Louis Billetiere Jr. sued his former fiancée, Krista Clark, after breaking off their engagement in a text message. Let's pause here for a second. I know that text messages can be convenient and non-threatening, but some conversations require a person to have the decency to be an adult and pick up the phone at the very least. And apparently, to soften the blow, the text also said she could keep the $53,000 ring as a parting gift. And he even went as far as to tell her she could use it as a down payment on a house. I already know what you're thinking. Keep the ring, girl, and run. He's probably crazy anyway to do some mess like that. And why is this even an issue or in the court anyway to begin with? Well, the man changed his mind. He wants the ring back, claiming that his text message was a joke. But actually, the joke is on him, because even though in New York typically tends to rule in the man's favor in this type of situation, the judge ruled that the text message proved that the ring was a gift, and simply because Billetiere changed his mind, he can't get it back. There are varying opinions on this matter, whether it is personal or lawful, but one man's careless text proves that if you make a promise, you better keep it. My moment is now over, but I can promise that I'll be back next week, so be sure to listen right here on The Kathy Jordan Show.
Thank you, Marsha. And, of course, Rich Hirschlag, our steady author of Sweat the Small Stuff. He's standing by for the next 4 minutes. And, Rich, you were talking about being carded. We were talking about alcoholism today, and you're talking about the fact that in your state, you have some real strict liquor laws, and you were carded last week.
Absolutely, and the week before. First of all, great topic, and I'm all for drinking responsibly, although I must tell you, when I pick up a beer after work, responsibility is not the first thing that crosses my mind. Maybe the second. Yeah, Pennsylvania is where I am. It's a great state overall, but they, every time you purchase liquor, and, even sometimes when you don't, they want their license. They just seem to be ID happy in this state, and it's like, okay, I'm 51 years old. I think I've earned the privilege not to have to dig into my wallet and pull out that license. Although, come on, I have an ego, it's flattering. But at 51, okay, I look a little young. Maybe I look 43 or 44, but come on, give me a break here.
You're sure you don't look 21?
Oh, I'm sure. Listen, as far as 21 goes, I have skin tags that are 21. My wife has stretch marks that are 22.
Oh, no.
And I feel bad for my wife, because whenever I'm confronted with like an absurd situation like that, she has to hear me just not rant rave. I just, me, Kathy, I start dishing out the one-liners to the poor guy behind the counter. He doesn't know. He's just doing his job. I'm saying things like, okay, you want my license? All right. I've had hangovers older than you, I was failing a breathalyzer test when your mother was failing rabbit tests. Wow. Cognac my age sells for $400 a bottle. I'm so old you could card my card and it would pass, but here's my license, buddy.
And what did he say when you kind of gave him that disdainful look of, okay, I can't believe you're really doing this?
He said, yeah, please leave, sir. No. He said, I'm sorry, we have to do this, and I understand. And I'm like, oh, so now you're telling me that I really do look old. No,
So you're basically saying you have fake IDs that are older than him?
Yes, I do. I have fake IDs I have fake IDs from the 80s, even from the late 70s. They're like in a trophy case. I feel bad for the guy, and I just let him know, listen, I'm not busting your chops here. I'm just using you for material because, this is a crazy moment, and you got it's like, this is one of those opportunities when you can feel young for a second, although it's like a guilty pleasure because, it ain't true. Kathy, we're both over 21, right? The last time I was carded legitimately, it was a long time. You want to know how long ago that was?
How long ago was it?
People still sang on their own albums, okay?
You mean they weren't mixing music back then and lip syncing?
No, they actually sang their own stuff. It was crazy. Last time I was carded legitimately, a laptop was what formed when you sat down. You know, your lap.
Your lap became a top.
Yeah, exactly. Cell phones, we had them, but they looked like these police radios, and they came attached to a car. We used to do. Remember how crazy we were when we were young? We used to board airplanes without cavity searches.
Wow, that was a long time ago. We didn't have that intrusive thing that's going on now. We didn't have to take off our shoes and socks and everything.
Oh, the good old days, the good old days. That's what it brings me back to when I get carded. It's just sort of like this weird anachronism. How's that for a word? Remember this? Remember when movie theaters had balconies? You know, when they weren't cut up into like 16 plexes?
Right.
Movie theaters had balconies, and like people used to go up there and, you know, neck a little bit, make out. That's what they did before they had iPhones.
Well, Rich, you know, you certainly gave us a lot of rich stuff to listen to. We really appreciate it. No pun intended. Rich Hirschlag, Sweat the Small Stuff. We'll be back on the Kathy Jordan Show next week with a very hot topic, very timely as usual. Remember, in parting on the show, if you don't stand up for something, you may fall for anything.
Thank you for listening to today's show. The show is brought to you by PJ Productions. Executive producer Kathy Jordan Pettis. Associate producers Marcia Coltrane and Bill Hubscher. Special contributor Rich Hirschlag, author of Sweat the Small Stuff. To listen to this episode or others on MP3 or for more information, log on to KathyJordanShow.com or email us at info@KathyJordanShow.com. This has been a PJ production. Warm and Fuzzy Radio.